He didn't cancel. He replaced her. That's the part that catches in my throat when I tell it. The part I still hear in the quietest rooms, a phone lighting up at 7:47 p.m. A little pink tulle dress pressed against cold glass. And 3 words that broke the sound of hope: she's more fun. If you've ever stood in a hallway counting your own heartbeats so you wouldn't knock on a child's door and promise what you couldn't deliver, you already know the feeling. It doesn't roar. It unthreads. It turns you into someone who finally calls the one person who can make the world answer. My name is Francine, 38. Hair permanently tied back by elastic and habit. Fingers that smell like mint and latex from Riverside Dental. Rent paid on a 2-bedroom on Maple Street where the walls are more memory than paint. My daughter Bridget is 10. With her father's green eyes and my stubborn calm, she makes friendship bracelets for kids who sit alone and saves her allowance to buy cat food for the stray behind our building. She believes people are basically good. She believed, right up until that Saturday, that her father was one of them. Warren is 42, all charm where it counts and empty where it should. He sells commercial real estate, drives a BMW he shouldn't, and smiles with everything except his eyes. We were married 8 years, divorced 2, and he remarried in 6 months to Stephanie, who came with a daughter named Harper and a perfectly filtered life. My brother-in-law, Jerome, is the counterweight in this messy little solar system, 6'4" in suspenders and soft voice. A family court judge who keeps candy in his desk and watches bullies try to win with volume. He doesn't raise his voice. He raises consequences. The father-daughter dance at Willowbrook Elementary wasn't just an event. For 4th graders, it was a coronation. Bridget started planning in December, whispering into the phone so carefully when she finally asked him, "Daddy, it's on a Saturday. You won't even miss work." And when he said yes, she squealed like sunshine. He even Venmo'd $300 for Bridget's dress. Make it special, and for a minute I let myself think maybe a door had opened. We went to Macy's and she found the dress. Layers of pink tulle that lifted around her like a promise. Tiny pearl beads catching the light as she spun. "This is it, Mom," she whispered. "This is the one Daddy will love." By 6 p.m., she was stationed at our front window. Curls set. Tiny pearl earrings from her grandmother. A silk ribbon tied at the back in a bow so tidy it could have been measured. "I'll see Daddy's car the second he turns in," she said, breath fogging the glass. At 6:30 p.m., I texted him. At 6:40 p.m., again. At 7 p.m. I made up traffic to a friend's mother and swallowed the acid taste of lying to protect a child's softest part. At 7:30 p.m., Bridget sat down on the couch without looking away from the window and asked, "Do you think something bad happened?" When my phone finally buzzed at 7:47 p.m., I opened it with hands that shook from hope and read the thing that ended it. "Can't make it tonight. Stephanie insisted I take Harper instead. You know how 8-year-olds are more fun. Bridget will understand. Buy her ice cream or something." I wish I could tell you I threw the phone. I didn't. I sat beside my daughter on the pink cloud of her dress and said the words I'd never said out loud to her before. "Baby. Daddy's not coming tonight." She stood up like she was older than me, set one hand on the wall to steady herself, and walked to her room. No door slam, just the quiet click of something shutting that shouldn't have to shut in a child. I waited. I listened. At 8:47 p.m., the sobbing turned to sleep. I took off her shoes, pulled her grandmother's quilt up to her chin, and kissed her forehead, then walked back into the living room where Warren's message still glowed, and my patience didn't. I scrolled to Jerome's name. He answered on the second ring. "Francine. Everything okay?" And my voice surprised me with how steady it was when I said, "No, and I'm done pretending it is." Jerome didn't waste a breath on outrage. He listened. I could hear his pen scratch through the quiet as I told him about the dance, and then everything that came before it, the late checks, the almost never weekends, the Instagram photos from Aspen on Christmas morning, while my daughter unwrapped a text that said, "Merry Xmas," and nothing else. When I got to last summer, how he left Bridget alone for 3 hours in his apartment and told her not to answer the door, Jerome's voice lowered into that courtroom register that makes rooms hold still. How old was she when he left her? And I said 9. And the silence after that answer said more than any speech. Forward the message about the dance. He said at 9:22 p.m. And starting tonight, document everything. Missed visits, late payments, screenshots of anything that shows income. I'll make calls on Monday. We'll do this clean. I stood in the kitchen with the nightlight throwing soft shapes on the tile and felt something I hadn't touched in 2 years, power without rage. At 10:06 p.m., I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it what it needed to be named: proof, bank statements, calendar entries, emails to teachers, texts from Warren promising and withdrawing in the same breath. I printed pages until the printer coughed tired and warm. I wasn't rehearsing heartbreak anymore. I was building a case, not to punish a man, but to protect a child. Sunday morning arrived like a held breath finally released. At 7:10 a.m., I made coffee so strong it could stand unassisted and spread papers across the table, while the apartment held the hush of a sleeping kid who cried herself empty. Every receipt had a story. Here's the weekend he skipped for a client tournament. Here's the date stamp on the restaurant where he celebrated that same night with Stephanie. At 9:03 a.m., Bridget appeared in the doorway in pajamas, hair flattened, eyes puffy, voice shaped into something too steady for 10. "Did I dream it?" she asked. And I said no. And she nodded like a judge delivering a verdict to herself. "Can we return the sparkly hairspray? Maybe another girl needs it." I said we could keep it for a day that deserved glitter. And for the first time since the window, a tiny smile pulsed and disappeared. Monday began at 6 a.m., with boxed lunches and a new promise I made to myself, and to the mirror I will not teach her to make excuses for being hurt. At 7:02 a.m., Jerome texted, "Turning wheels. Expect a call." I input patients at Riverside Dental like muscle memory while my head kept clocking the years of almosts. At 12:41 p.m., a voicemail waited. "Mrs. Coleman. This is Deborah Winters, forensic accountant. Judge Garrett requested a preliminary review. Please return my call." I stepped into the alley behind the office with the scent of mint still on my gloves and called back. Deborah's voice was brisk and precise. "We'll need bank statements for the last 2 years, any Venmo notes, social media indicators of lifestyle, and copies of all child support records. I said I could have them by 5 p.m., and I did. Tuesday, the mask slipped off his numbers. Deborah called at 11:16 a.m. with the first crack. "Mrs. Coleman." The financial affidavits Mr. Coleman filed list an annual income of $40,000. His tax forms and closing statements tell a different story. 3 commissions in the last 6 months, each over $30,000. I leaned against the break room fridge and stared at a laminated poster about flossing. "Is that enough?" I asked. And she said, "It's a start." Also, we found a Delaware shell WC Premium Properties LLC funneling income off books. That, combined with his dependent claim for Bridget while paying inconsistent support, is material. The word material hit me like a door swinging open into bright air. By 2:03 p.m., Tuesday, a clerk from family court had left a neat message in my inbox: emergency hearing requested for Friday at 2 p.m. Subject: substantial misrepresentation of financial resources and child support recalculation. I read it twice, then a third time, hands steady for the first time in a long time. The system Warren waved like a threat was turning toward the child he'd treated like an option, and somewhere between the printer's hum and Deborah's crisp assurances, I realized the part of me that stood in hallways counting heartbeats had learned a new rhythm, the tempo of consequences drawing near. Wednesday began quietly, the way storms do before they split the sky. I dropped Bridget at school at 7:45 a.m., watched her shoulders shrink under the chatter of kids trading stories about the dance, their phones glowing with photos she would never see. Melody, bless her heart, tried to loop an arm through Bridget's, but my daughter just smiled a small, practice smile and said, "Daddy got sick." The lie landed between them like a folded napkin, neat, necessary, disposable. I sat in my car long after the bell rang, gripping the steering wheel, whispering, "Not one more tear for him, baby," to no one but the dashboard. By mid-morning, the storm had a name: Audit. Deborah called at 10:12 a.m. "Mrs. Coleman, the IRS is involved now. They've requested 5 years of records. Apparently, your ex-husband has been living a double life." Her voice held that crisp satisfaction of someone untying a perfect knot. "They'll find it all," she added. "And frankly, it's not looking good for him." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back didn't look tired anymore. She looked awake. By Wednesday afternoon, word had reached his office. Louise, his secretary, texted my cousin who texted me. He went white as paper when the IRS call came in. Thought he was having a heart attack. I pictured him there, surrounded by glass walls and expensive chairs, clutching at control he could no longer afford. At 3 p.m., the family court notice was officially served. The arrogance that used to make him taller than every room was about to meet a ceiling. Thursday morning, he tried calling 17 times between 8:30 a.m. and noon. I didn't answer. At 12:45 p.m., Stephanie's name appeared instead. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. "Francine," she said, voice trembling. "I need to ask you something. Has Warren been hiding money?" I kept my tone even. "The court is investigating." Why a breath, then a soft curse, because I just found bank statements I didn't know existed: 3 properties, 2 in his name, 1 in that shell company. He told me we couldn't afford to have a baby because of your child support. He said you were draining him dry. My laugh came out low and tired. He's paid full support 3 times in 2 years. Silence. Then, that bastard. He made me feel guilty every time I bought Harper a dress. "I thought you were the problem." Her voice cracked. "He took Harper to that dance. Francine. She's been asking why Bridget didn't come. She said Bridget cried at school. For a second, we were 2 women orbiting the same wound. Stephanie," I said. "You didn't know, but you do now. I'll testify if you need me to," she whispered. "I have receipts, recordings, everything." Friday arrived heavy with consequence. I wore my scrubs, Jerome's idea. "Let the judge see who's doing the real work," he'd said. Warren came in his best suit, hair shellacked into confidence that didn't match his eyes. At 2 p.m., sharp. Judge Garrett took her seat, gray hair pulled back, voice like tempered steel. She reviewed the documents in silence for 15 minutes. When she finally looked up, it wasn't at me, it was at him. "Mr. Coleman, in 23 years on this bench, I've rarely seen such blatant disregard for truth or duty. You've committed perjury, tax fraud, and willful neglect of your child's welfare." Her gavel didn't slam, it landed. "You owe $47,318 in back support, payable immediately. Future payments are set at $3,000 per month. Any failure will result in arrest." Warren opened his mouth, but she wasn't done. "This text message," she said, holding up the printed page. "She's more fun, tells me all I need to know about your fitness as a father. Supervised visitation only, pending evaluation. Court adjourned." The sound of that gavel was quieter than Bridget's bedroom door that night, but it meant something louder. The world had finally called him what he was. The man who'd taught my daughter to wait by a window was now the one waiting for permission to see her. Justice doesn't always roar, it sometimes whispers through paperwork, through calm judges, through mothers who decide to stop apologizing. The fall was fast and merciless. Within a week of that hearing, Warren's life collapsed like the hollow structure it was. The IRS froze 2 of his accounts. His biggest client, Robert Hutchinson, a father of 4 daughters, pulled a $3 million property deal after his wife, who sat on the Willowbrook Elementary PTA, told him everything. A man who skips his daughter's dance for another child, she'd said, isn't someone you want handling your investments. By the next Monday, his name was whispered only in past tense at the country club. The golden boy of real estate had turned into a cautionary tale with a mortgage. Stephanie filed for divorce 3 days later. She called me that evening, voice hoarse from crying. I packed Harper's things, she said. We're staying with my mother. Harper keeps asking if Bridget is okay. She made her a card that says, I'm sorry your daddy was mean. I closed my eyes, picturing that little girl's handwriting and the way kindness can live even inside the wreckage adults make. Tell her Bridget's fine, I said softly. She's got people who show up. You're one of them. Stephanie whispered back, you deserved better, too. And maybe that was the first time I believed it. After that, gifts started arriving at our door: an iPad, a designer backpack, Disney World tickets, even a $1,000 shopping card. Each box came with a note in Warren's handwriting that said some version of, I miss you, Princess. Bridget opened the first one, stared at the glittering tablet, and then looked at me. Send it back. Mom, I don't want things. I wanted him. She said it again with each new delivery, until the gesture itself stopped hurting and just became something to tape over and return. Actions echo, Jerome told me once, and I finally saw what he meant. Sometimes they echo all the way back to the one who made them. 3 months later, a knock came on a Saturday morning. Warren stood in the doorway, thinner, eyes rimmed with something that looked like regret if you didn't look too long. Please. Francine, he said. Let me talk to her. I need to explain. His voice broke on the word explain, as if any vocabulary existed for what he'd done. Explain what I asked quietly? How a stranger's child was more fun than your own. He started to speak again, but behind me came the soft sound of slippers on tile. Bridget appeared, clutching the book she'd been reading. You didn't make a mistake. Daddy, she said, voice level as stone. You made a choice. Mistakes are accidents. You chose Harper. He reached out, the way you might reach for something falling in slow motion, but she stepped back. Bridge, Princess, please. I'm your father. She looked at him for a long moment that seemed to hold the weight of both their lives. A father shows up. A father keeps promises. A father doesn't trade his daughter for someone more fun. You're just the man who sends checks now. And you know what? That's better than the man who sent lies. Then she turned and walked back to her room. No slam, no theatrics. Just the same quiet dignity she'd learned on the night of the pink dress. He stood there shaking. When did she become so cold, he whispered. She's not cold, I said. She's protected. There's a difference. He left without another word, and the echo of his footsteps down the hall was the last time I ever heard him walking toward us. 6 months later, the payments came like clockwork, garnished. Not voluntary. His BMW was gone, replaced by a 10-year-old Honda. His smile had vanished from every glossy ad in town. Stephanie's divorce took half of what was left. The IRS took the rest. He learned the kind of math that can't be undone by charm. But I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. Because justice isn't triumph. It's quiet balance returning to a life that deserved it. A year after the dance that broke her heart, Willowbrook Elementary held another father-daughter night. The pink tulle dress still hung in Bridget's closet. A little longer now, its bodice wrinkled but intact, a relic of innocence turned armor. She hadn't mentioned the event once, and I hadn't dared bring it up. But a week before, Jerome called. Gloria and I were talking. He said, voice gentle, I never had daughters, only boys. Would Bridget let her Uncle Jerome take her this year for a second? I couldn't speak. Then I asked her that evening, half afraid she'd shut down. Instead, her eyes lit up for the first time in months. Uncle Jerome wants to take me. Really? She wore the same pink dress, let out at the seams to fit the girl who'd grown taller and stronger since the last February. Jerome arrived in a full tuxedo, corsage in hand, looking both awkward and endearing. "I've presided over hundreds of trials," he said, grinning, "but I've never been this nervous." I watched them walk toward the school gym under a canopy of lights, his hand steady on her shoulder, and something in my chest unclenched. That night, they danced every dance. He bent his tall frame to match her rhythm, learned the cha-cha slide and the Cupid shuffle, and held her hand during the spotlight dance meant for fathers and daughters. When she cried halfway through the song, he knelt and whispered, "You're worth 1,000 dances. Bridget, don't ever forget that." The photo from that night sits on our mantel now, Jerome in his tuxedo, Bridget in her pink dress, both laughing as he spins her. Beside it, another picture from her middle school graduation. She's older, poised, holding a citizenship award for standing up for others and spreading kindness. In her acceptance speech, she said, "My mom taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help, and the strongest thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve." Warren wasn't there. He'd lost his supervised visitation rights after missing 3 scheduled sessions. The man who once dictated our lives through threats and charm was now a ghost in a paper trail, his checks arriving on time only because the law insisted they should. Sometimes he still includes notes begging for forgiveness, updates about his life, or requests for another chance. Bridget doesn't even open them. I've forgiven him. Mom, she told me last month as we sorted the mail, but forgiveness doesn't mean access. He taught me that when he had it and chose someone else. She's 14 now. She doesn't wait by windows anymore. She doesn't chase people who treat her like an option, and she doesn't let anyone convince her that love should hurt. That night in the pink dress didn't destroy her. It shaped her. It taught her that blood doesn't define family. Actions do. That showing up matters more than promises, and that sometimes the universe doesn't deliver justice with thunder or rage. It comes through a quiet phone call, a folder of proof, and a mother who finally says, "Enough." The last time I saw Warren was 6 months ago at a gas station. He looked smaller somehow, his hair fully gray, his expensive suit replaced by khakis and a polo. He saw us. Started to walk over, but Bridget just took my hand and said softly, "We don't know him anymore." Mom. We got in our car and drove away, leaving him standing by pump 3, watching the family he traded slip into the distance. Some might say I was cruel for not protecting their bond, but I didn't destroy it. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his choices. There's a difference between keeping peace and keeping secrets, between forgiveness and enabling, between being a father and being a man who shares DNA. Bridget learned that lesson at 10, and it became her strength never settle for someone who treats you like a convenience. Because sometimes the night that shatters you is the same night you start rebuilding into someone unbreakable. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment about a time when someone's actions showed you who they truly were. I read every single one. Remember, you're worth showing up for.